You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin, and I'm joined by Tony, and we are here to talk everything that happened over the past week related to all of the streaming services. As we are every week, we bring you all of the content and news topics from the world of the streaming services. This includes all the major services like Netflix, Prime Video, Apple TV+, Disney+, HBO Max, as well as some of the minor services that we also cover, including Hulu, CBS All Access, Peacock, Quibi, among others. As if this is your first time listening to the show, you'll be aware that there's lots of stuff that we talk about, some of which you'll be very interested in and some of which you won't. However, if there is something that you are interested in, you want to learn more about, we do have articles, all of the articles that we reference here on the podcast. We do have them in the show notes for you to click on with direct links to actually read those articles so you can learn even more about some of the topics that we discuss. In addition to that, we also have trailers, links to the trailers that have released from a variety of the different streaming services over the past week as well. Be sure to check out the show notes for all of that. So let's just jump into the news topics for the week. So the first up is there's a lot of mobile carriers that are making new plans with new streaming services that are coming soon. First one is T-Mobile announced that they're partnering with Quibi. Yes, Quibi, the service that we somehow hear more about than almost any other service out there, because it seems like at least their marketing department does a great job of making sure that people are constantly talking about the service, because over the past couple of weeks, almost every single day, they're announcing some new partnership with some existing media company to create content, like we've talked in the past about ESPN, Fox Sports, as among others, TMZ. Everybody's making content for Quibi because it's short-form content, and in most cases, it's content that they're already producing. They're just having to re-edit it in a different version to be able to release it on Quibi. But if you're unfamiliar with Quibi, Quibi is meant to be short form segments, no more than 10-minute episodes. They're going to be releasing a variety of different content related to news and daily content related to a variety of topics, as well as TV shows and movies that are also released in segmental format. So T-Mobile announced that they will be partnering with Quibi, and they will offer their 83.1 million customers access to Quibi's premium content. Up at this point, they have not announced exactly how it will be available, but it has announced that it will be available. So a lot of assumptions here is that part of their premium service that T-Mobile offers will be where you will get Quibi. Currently, Quibi also, or T-Mobile that is, also offers Netflix to their subscribers as well. You'll constantly see commercials on TV saying, subscribe now to T-Mobile and get Netflix for free. That is, and obviously Quibi's not coming until next spring, but when it does, it's entirely possible that if you have a premium service through T-Mobile, Quibi will be free to you. Now, that's not to say it won't be the free version that will have ads, because that's more likely to be the case. Just as the Netflix for free is not actually complete, it's not like the top tier. They give you the option of upgrading to a higher tiered plan that Netflix offers, but for the most part, that's what it is. So, T-Mobile, Quibi, 2020.
I am guilty. I made fun of the name a few episodes back, and it seems like there's going to be a lot of coverage on it. It seems like people are excited about this. Now, excitement does not imply people are going to subscribe to it. People can be excited by the idea, but not actually be on board for it. It's like people asking to volunteer for something. It's like, oh yeah, we should do that because it's good. We should do that because there's some moral obligation to do it. But then you ask them to volunteer your time and or your resources, and then they're like, I'm busy, I can't do it. I'm worried that that's going to be about Quibi. I think the idea of short form content is going to be interesting. Meg Whitman used to be the CEO of HP, and she has a pretty good reputation in the tech sector, and she's got a good reputation. What that, for a brand new idea, it's nice to have some like industry veterans kind of backing you up, and with her like name, that brings in a lot of weight to Quibi. You know, it's somebody who is a veteran, seasoned CEO, and she believes in this very interesting and brand new idea per se. And so that's great. And if you look at, I sent, we'll add this in the show notes, I sent Dustin a article earlier today from CNN, and they had an expose on Quibi and the two like co-CEOs and the big name producers, creators that they've gotten for Quibi. It's impressive, and so it seems that people are willing to take a shot at it. Give their time and resources to create this product. And I'm worried that people aren't going to download another app to do short form content. That's the one thing I'm worried about. I think short form content can work, but maybe in my head I'm imagining like either Snapchat or Instagram would take up the short form content space and really flesh it out. And Snapchat's moving more toward that than Instagram is, but Quibi seems like they're getting all the big names behind them. People always use, a lot of people use Snapchat, I don't. A lot of people use Netflix, I do have that one. And I'm not sure people are going to buy another app just to watch video, You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know if target audience of millennials will do that. So that's my one hesitation right now. But, seeing that there's a lot of excitement for Quibi, there's a lot of big names coming to produce content for Quibi. There's a lot of, high-ranking CEO, ex-CEOs and industry veterans interested in this product. It makes me change my view a little bit, optimistic per se.
I will include that article. This is back from the beginning of the month, but it's definitely interesting to take a look at the ins and outs of how they're planning on running their company. It was also reported just a couple days ago that Quibi has sold their entire first year's worth of ad space valued at over $150 million. That is very interesting to say the least, because that means they have a lot of advertisers who are extremely interested in this service. In addition to the fact that lots of existing companies who are also going to be creating content, such as Warner Media, they're also going to be creating content for Quibi in the future as well, and they're investors in the project. That is definitely something to take consideration of. The one catch, like Tony said, is that will people actually pay for it? I don't see myself paying for something like that. I also, in that article from CNN, they also mentioned that Quibi is going to be a service that is exclusively available on mobile devices, not televisions, not Roku's, not Apple TVs or Amazon Fire TVs, or the different devices that allow you to watch it on television. Their aim is to use your existing mobile phone as your television screen. They've also said a variety of different things as far as you'll be able to watch it either horizontally or vertically, because they're planning on filming it both directions or something, so you can watch it either way.
That's actually interesting. From a pure, cinematic point of view, like, camera angle is very important for all these shots. I mean, if you watch any Zack Snyder film, he abuses, different camera angles and effects and stuff like that. And so, a lot of these creators do that. And so you're going to film it both in portrait and landscape mode. That's two different modes, and that gets two different fields of view. That adds extra time either in planning or, editing. It might not be much, but when you're trying to do all these different shows, like, time adds up, and time is money, and money is pizza if you watch Parks and Rec.
Go ahead.
Aubrey Plaza and Parks and Rec, it's just a great show. And
it's on my list. It's on my list of stuff to watch in the near future. I'm just waiting for like a lull of stuff, which of course is not coming anytime soon.
So for those listening, this was not planned as a segue, but this is a great segue into NBC and their new strategy on content.
Yes, Variety held a specific interview with the NBC Universal chief, Steve Burke, and he specifically had said that they are not trying to chase the Netflix model with Peacock, which basically confirms what Tony and I had said in the past about how Peacock seems to be more in line with CBS All Access and less in line with HBO Max and Disney Plus and Apple TV Plus, Netflix and Prime Video. Specifically because if it's not chasing the Netflix model of having an enormous amount of original content, which he states in the interview, they're not looking to do that. He says that they're working within the existing ecosystem where there's a lot of advertising supported video on demand, which is clearly what CBS All Access has. We also talked about how NBC, this was in the past, not necessarily in this interview, but in the past we talked about how they were going to really focus heavily on the fact that they had the Summer Olympics next summer. And I was not super familiar with this, so I did a little bit of research because I don't have CBS All Access as one of my services. And CBS All Access does offer NFL football on their service. The ones that will actually play on CBS you can watch, and it was very interesting because last year the Super Bowl was on CBS, and they made a point to mention right around the time of the Super Bowl that the Super Bowl boosted CBS All Access subscribers up. They increased 50% before the Super Bowl because they had the Super Bowl, so people were watching the Super Bowl on CBS All Access instead of watching on live television, because it was an option. So NBC is, I'm positive at this point, NBC Universal is going to go the exact same route as CBS All Access, and they will create some original content, just like CBS All Access is creating new Star Wars shows and a variety of other shows, but they're not creating a large library of original content. You're lucky. Generally, you're getting one new show every 2 months, and the show airs its season, and then you go into the next show. Picard is coming in January. Star Trek Discovery is coming sometime next year with their latest season. There was the Twilight Zone earlier this year. They just wrapped up a show called Why Women Kill. There's a lot of shows on CBS All Access, but they don't create any sort of content at the quantity that Netflix or some of these other services are going to be creating content. So I'm positive that is the thing. And now NBC Universal is having to go out there and say, listen, we're not trying to be Netflix or Prime Video or HBO Max or Disney Plus or any of these other large services. That's not what we're trying to do. We're looking at this more towards this other thing without name dropping CBS All Access. They are trying to be that, because I think, at least in the media, they're currently portraying Peacock as a major service that's going to really amp up the amount of content that they'll be able to have and things like that. And I think it's been overplayed by the media, because I don't think, mostly because just NBC Universal hasn't laid out exactly what the plan is, other than saying there will be an ad-supported version of the app. So they're not chasing Netflix, which, like we said, that's pretty much what we expected.
I think that's good. I think that this space has room to be diverse. I don't think that everyone needs to chase Netflix, and that sort of depends on the business company. I mean, NBC is backed by Comcast, They have the resources behind them to take a diverse path. Netflix might be the answer. That type of content might be the way to go. At the end of the day, if you look in 10 years, that people will be after, Disney Plus and Amazon and those services, because they're the most profitable model. However, there are other spaces to go, and I feel NBC is going down a different road. I think it's a safer bet, but I think it's a way to grow their content base. I think it's a way to be profitable out of the bank. I think it's a smart decision for them. They're not trying to go for gold. They're staying in their lane. They know where to go. Yeah, I think that's fine. It's almost like let's make a good boxing analogy. I love boxing. Instead of going for the knockout blow to the head, just work on the body, take body shots, and slowly wear out your opponent over time. NBC looks, and CBS All Access, it's less pretty. It's less like showy, less big and extravagant, and less spending like $50 million or whatever on TV episodes and shows, and then outlandish amounts of money on movies, and just taking it slow and knowing what they're doing. So I think this is a great decision.
Yeah, and there was a couple of other real small points that I just want to mention from the same interview. They also made a comment to say that they have every intention to keep existing plans with other companies to continue to license their content to a certain degree. So, for example, Universal currently has a deal with HBO where HBO gets the first premiere rights to movies like Jurassic World or the Fast and the Furious films. They come to HBO before they, instead of any other service, and HBO pays money for that. And they made a big deal about how they have no intention of ending those deals that they have existing with other companies. Now, I don't think that means that those films will be on HBO Max necessarily until, for a certain amount of time while they would be on HBO. But that's not that's also interesting because it presents a thing where HBO also licenses a lot of other movies in general from other studios to be on their service, to be on their network in general. And that could be an interesting thing because there could be a set of movies for short periods of time at least that show up on HBO or HBO Max before they show up anywhere else outside of physical release, obviously. So that could be interesting. There was another point that I wanted to bring up, kind of going back to what you were saying. While they are going to be, they're not going to be a flashy service because they are backed and owned by Comcast. It also seems like it would be not in their best interest to have a massive service that could encourage cord cutters to continue to grow. Comcast's main business is being an internet service provider and a cable provider. Cable provider was what they always were prior to an internet service provider, and that's the core of their business. So the last thing they want is to lose even more cable subscribers, even though they consistently are losing more cable subscribers. We're going to talk about earnings in about a week and a half after we have everything, but Comcast actually had their earnings call earlier today and announced that they lost another 250,000 subscribers for cable TV just this past quarter, and it continues to happen. And even though they are profitable because they're making money in other aspects of their business, that is something that is continuously happening. So by encouraging more and more people to cut the cord and no longer have cable is not actually in the parent company's best interest. That same thing could be said of AT&T though, because they have their own TV provider service that they offer through not only AT&T or Uverse, but also DirecTV as well. So there's that aspect of it too. Is AT&T potentially cannibalizing their own services that they can sell by having this? And the answer is yes, but they've also shown that DirecTV is consistently failing and losing subscribers at an alarming rate, so it's not something they can really hinge a ton of bets on and say, let's put all of our chips behind DirecTV because it just keeps losing more and more subscribers every single quarter. So I think that they're looking at this from a perspective of they can see the writing on the wall and they're trying to do something else.
I mean, let's be honest. We talk about this always being a zero-sum game. I can see some of these other cable providers be like, you know what? We tried it, but this just isn't worth our time. And, license their content out to other people. I mean, especially for some of these, like for Comcast, they might not feel like it's worth it. And yeah, it's like, keeping it, in-house, their platform, their content, like, yeah, that's great and that's awesome. But, you don't have to worry about infrastructure costs. You don't have to worry about marketing. You have to worry about all this different stuff. You can license your content out and let other people worry about it and then just get royalty checks. That's licensing fees. And that's a solid business plan.
Yeah, it is. And that's literally what Warner Brothers has done for years. It's just been in the last couple of years that they've started to pull back their stuff in general just because of the initial, the intent of rolling out their own service. But that is, we talked about this before when we talked about the current state of HBO Max. Warner Brothers in general, this has been their model for like decades. They create an enormous amount of content. They license it out to a ton of different networks, and they make a ton of money on it. And while they own the rights to the shows, the shows that are, airing the shows are making money too. But ultimately, they are making tons of content for a variety of networks that was their entire business model. And that's why a lot of times when they are asking people like Kevin Riley, the chief content officer for HBO Max, he is specifically saying, we are still intend on creating content for other stations. It's not that we're not going to create content. We're going to continue to do that. But we will be looking at our content, deciding what we want before we go shop it to somebody else. And I think that's a smart way to do it, honestly.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So one more thing to bring up about NBC real quick before we move on. We talked about this before, the Peacock name. Ever since we had the episode Current State of Peacock, which was a little less than a month ago.
That's when I totally roasted the company in that name.
You did. And then of course you found out that Peacock is the mascot of the company, and then it was like you forgave them.
Don't embarrass me.
I'm not going to do it anymore.
I didn't realize that was the logo.
Yes. Here's an interesting thing. So I watch a couple of shows on NBC, just on, off my DVR. And one of the things I've noticed ever since we recorded that episode was there's been a couple of, ever since the new season of shows has started at the end of September and early October, I've been seeing these commercials where there's an NBC show, the actors who are playing the characters on some of the shows like Andy Samberg from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But I've seen commercials where there's an actual live peacock in the commercial, and they refer to the peacock as their boss. And I've seen these commercials for a couple of weeks now, and the first time I saw the commercial was actually when David Harbour was hosting SNL, and he goes to a couple of the SNL cast members and goes, "I've got a problem. There's something in my dressing room. Can you come help me?" They see the peacock in the dressing room. They're like, "Oh, we'd like to help you, but he's the boss. We can't help you. What he says goes." And they're like, "But can't you just can I just get a broom and, shoo him out of here?" And he's like, "Nope, that's our boss." And I just kept thinking, what a weird commercial. Why are they have this peacock? And then I started to think about it and realized this is like a marketing thing that they are slowly building to make people more aware of the peacock being the logo, the mascot, the figurehead of NBC Universal, so that when they eventually do roll out Peacock, it makes more sense to a normal person who just watches a couple shows on NBC, because there's a lot of them. So I found an article for Variety, which is in the show notes, which is actually, it dates back to the mid-September, but it talks about how starting back at San Diego Comic-Con, NBC tried to make a concerted effort to make sure that people are aware that their brand has always been hit comedies, and now they're doing a lot of commercials, advertising shows featuring the Peacock too. So it was very interesting, and I thought to myself, this is definitely not subliminal, because it's not, but it's definitely an effort to make people more consciously aware of the Peacock, so it makes more sense when the service actually launches. Because the normal person who's watching a show on NBC has probably not heard about the Peacock service. But when they eventually do hear about it, they'll make the association because they've been seeing commercials for months featuring a peacock.
So I only have one question. So given that statement that NBC's always been known for the comedies, which I agree, when you were talking about Peacock being the boss and those commercials, I just got like 30 Rock vibes where it's like super meta.
Yeah.
And Alec Baldwin is himself, which is either good or bad, depends on the context. But I got those vibes. But since they've always been known for the comedies, and they're the creators of like The Office, 30 Rock, Parks and Rec, Community, which, shameless plug, if you haven't seen Community, you should really. It's really hilarious, very witty and sarcastic. And probably, Superstore has gotten really big. Do you think that they're going to revive some of these shows? We're in the age of nostalgia, right? We're in the age of streaming. We're also in the age of nostalgia, too. And The Office is a big hit, and especially it got bigger in the streaming age. Like, the show's a hit now, but when it came out, like, it started off with, like, horrible ratings, and then now it's grown into, like, a cult favorite. Parks and Rec is more cultish than The Office.
Community is even more cult-ish than...
6 seasons in the movies, guys.
Yeah.
6 seasons in a movie.
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to bring back some of these shows?
I mean, I don't know. I'm sure that all of these shows that they're heavily focusing on, that obviously are very, very big shows when it comes to people watching over and over again. There's a reason why a lot of these shows, Seinfeld was originally on NBC. Like you said, The Office. Well, Friends was there too, but unfortunately they don't have the rights to Friends because that's a Warner Brothers show. But a lot of the shows that they've created over the years, they are probably best known for some of their comedies. While there has been shows like Law and Order, SVU, which has been around for over 20 seasons, and they have their fair share of reality shows as well that they have. But the thing is, like, I think they're best known for their comedies, and I think that any show that they actually own the rights to, they will try to make an effort to make sure it's on their service. The only one out of all of the series that I've heard anything about that there's been any talk in relation to reviving is The Office, and it's because it is insanely popular. However, it was not so much about they would do a sequel, because most of the cast has stated multiple times that the only way they could see doing something is if everybody involved was still involved, and that's very unlikely. Steve Carell himself has said he wouldn't want to come back just to do it. He's also doing a show with Greg Daniels, one of the guys behind The Office, over at Netflix called Space Force, which I think is going to be great and really funny. But I think that they could easily, like, there was rumors back, so like I said earlier, I didn't watch The Office when it originally aired. I had seen episodes here or there, but I made an effort earlier this year when I didn't have anything really on my radar to watch. I watched all 9 seasons of The Office, and as I was going along and watching it, I was going back and reading information about different things. And one of the things I remember reading about was they had a backdoor pilot for Dwight's beet farm. As
the farm.
The farm.
Yes.
As they had basically they were trying to do a backdoor pilot to see if they could actually make it work. And while it didn't obviously get picked up and they didn't move forward with it, that is still something that I think could work, especially because Rainn Wilson, while he does work on projects and things like that, he's not like a big name like Steve Carell. So there's no reason they couldn't do a show based around him, because it wouldn't need to have John Krasinski, who's also a very big name. It wouldn't need Steve Carell, who's also a very big name. And they could just bring back a couple of people from the original series that make sense, like Angela. So, like, that's what they could do. So I think that would work and still, like, fall in line with what they've already been doing, especially because they could just skip forward a little bit. But I don't know, like, and they could be like, well, we're filming a new reality show about this. You know, I think the idea of that could work. Anything outside of that, like a reboot, I don't know that it would be as good, because I think there would be too much comparison to what originally happened. That's why when you look at so many different series, they don't tend to reboot comedies in general, because comedies it's really hard to get that spark twice. And if you don't get the spark twice, it's too much of a comparison, and then it looks like a failure. The only time you see, honestly, reboots of TV shows is when it comes to a lot of the dramas, and it's because when it's updated, sometimes it can work better. That's the only thing I've heard, and I've spent way longer talking about that than I wanted to. But yes, that's the only thing I could see as far as any of these other ones, as far as Cheers or some of the other older ones that they're known for. I don't really see them doing something like that, because I think, like, unless they were completely rebooting it, like they've talked about doing Saved by the Bell, and I think that could work, because they just do it with a new class. I mean, like, there was literally a Saved by the Bell series. It was called Saved by the Bell, the New Class, and it had none of the original cast members, and it didn't do so well. But introducing something to a completely new generation is not far-fetched, as long as it's done in a way that respects the original version of the series, but then does it in a new and interesting way that connects with a new generation.
Looking at you, Battlestar Galactica has like 15 reboots.
Yes, and that's another one that's going to be supposedly happening too. So, all right, so a couple of other real quick news points. Disney Plus announced that they are teaming up with Verizon. Customers of Verizon will be offering 12 months of Disney Plus to all new and existing 4G LTE and 5G unlimited wireless customers. Also, Verizon Fios home internet and 5G home customers can also enjoy 12 months of Disney Plus as well. So while it's not, you will just have it, like we talked about earlier, how T-Mobile offers Netflix to their customers, and Netflix and T-Mobile just foots the bill for their Netflix subscription. That, however, is not the same thing. It's just basically a 12-month trial. And the variety of reports that I've seen is basically this is Disney's answer to Apple offering 12 months for Apple TV Plus for free for their things. And I don't think that's it at all. Honestly, I feel like this is more in line with, if you're not aware, all of the cell phone carriers out there currently offer some sort of free premium service, whether it be Netflix, whether it be Prime Video, Hulu's the other one that some of them offer. There's a variety of different services that offer different things.
And people do this with Spotify and Apple Music. I mean, my brother was trying to get me to change cell phone plans because Verizon's offering this Apple Music, subscription. It's more of a popular thing going on these days.
It's something that's happening. I think that at the time when this got announced, I actually pulled up an article that from back in March that listed all the cell phone carriers and what they were currently offering as a premium content for their customers. And Verizon was actually the only one on that list that didn't have a video service that they were offering. So it makes sense that Verizon would go to one of the newer services that's out there.
It's interesting. Verizon, probably have another show on this later, but Verizon's been wanting to own or it's been always rumored to own one of these content providers. So you have at&t, which is an ISP. You have Comcast, which is an ISP. They do more broadband, where at&t does broadband and cell phone. Verizon is one of these big ISP players, but they don't have a digital media platform. And if you take like one step further, right, we're talking about the streaming wars and Netflix versus Apple versus Disney. Who's going to win? Who's going to win? The ISPs, because all the internet traffic is going through their routers and switches. So this is all a ploy, and it's really going to help Comcast and AT&T and Verizon to some extent. But yeah, they need a partner in the digital media space so that they can drive more people to use their service and whatnot. But that could be its whole entire show. But yeah. I just wanted to bring that up because that is important. The more we use these streaming services, the more second order effects are going to happen, and these third parties are going to become even richer. You could say that at the end of the whole entire streaming wars, who's going to win? It is the ISPs.
Yes,
and internet content providers. Like they're the ultimate winners. Everything else, who cares?
They are the winners, and they're the ones that it makes the most sense for them to go out there and to go after. Like, it makes perfect sense for AT&T and Comcast to try to get somebody, because by getting somebody who's creating content or a media company that has a flow of content on a normal basis, it makes way more sense for them to be involved in the content creation for what their customers are going to be consuming, because it creates that necessity for their services. So it makes perfect sense. So real quick, Apple TV. Last episode we talked about how Apple TV, their app launched on Roku. This time around, it was announced just earlier today that Apple TV has launched on Amazon Fire TV devices as well. So it will be launching. So it's smart again, because it means that Apple TV Plus will be able to be viewed on not only Apple products, but also Roku devices and Apple Fire TV devices as well, which is very, very smart, because it allows that buzz that's going to be building early on from when Apple TV Plus launches. It'll allow that buzz to be there for people to go then and then look on the devices that they already currently have to seek out these shows, and then obviously seek out a subscription, which is what Apple in general wants. So the last bit of news we have actually goes back to Netflix, and while we will talk about their financials, which we had last week, long story short, which we'll go into more details in a little less than 2 weeks, but the long story short is they did well in Q3. They did better than expected. And they actually had positives for the quarter, which a lot of people thought that wasn't going to happen, but it did, and that happened. But they followed up the announcement of the fact that they did well this quarter by also announcing that they are planning on taking $2 billion more in debt to create even more high-quality content for their service in the future. So it basically means that while they have a bunch of money coming in every single month, they don't have enough to deliver what they want. So while they're on track to spend over $15 billion on movies and TV this specific year, they're looking that they need another $2 billion to keep creating content. Well, I guess it doesn't necessarily mean anything specific other than they're really spending money like there's no tomorrow. I randomly read there was a tweet that was sent out, or that was retweeted by somebody else that I follow, that was completely unrelated to services, streaming services, or any media content like that, talking about how Netflix attends book fairs to sign authors to deals potentially before their books even come out, because they're trying to lock content down that they could adapt.
So our background, you amazing listeners, Dustin runs a Batman, news site, and I contribute to writing reviews and whatnot for the site, and we're very invested in the comic book world. I don't think many people know this. Netflix, they're in partnership with Mark Millar, who's a very famous comic book creator, and he has a lot of great properties, which I say that you should read on your own. He has a lot of great original content ideas, and Netflix's partnership with him, among other things, he's the most famous for the Kingsman series of movies. He wrote the original graphic novels for those. You sent an article a few weeks ago about, was it some comic book creator or a manga creator that Netflix just snagged
it
up?
was Bone, the series Bone, which is very popular in general. It's more like it's a all ages title, but they signed a animated show based off of his work.
And it makes total sense when you look at these streaming services. It seems like if you take a step further and you look at the whole entire media industry, it's kind of split between two different camps. You either have new content coming from nostalgia type things or reboots or sequels to different things, or the other avenue that seems like original content is coming from is not from like some media exec. You still have that, but like a Quentin Tarantino, or a Christopher Nolan coming up with cool ideas. It seems like a lot of stuff is coming from like book adaptations or graphic novels turned into TV shows or movies. I mean, the new Watchmen show that came out on HBO Max, that's from a graphic novel. The Boys on Amazon Prime, which is also getting amazing reviews, is from a graphic novel. And so these companies are picking up these ideas because a lot of them are fleshed out, especially with graphic novels. You have basically a full story and storyboarding already made. You have to change it for live action, but you already have the groundwork for all these great ideas. I mean, J.K. Rowling had a franchise. It's still continuing with, like Fantastic Beasts. And so it makes total sense. And I think Netflix is a little bit ahead of the game in this area of the new race for new ideas. And it seems like, Netflix is in that space, is doing great, in that area. Amazon has also locked up, providers. Disney doesn't necessarily need to do this because they have like these huge brands and they're always a powerhouse with new ideas. So for these companies who don't have necessarily the creative background as a Disney, it makes total sense for them. And it's a great business move to attack these authors even before their books are successful. And I think it could also be good and or bad for the authors. If the book kind of sucks, the authors might have had a good deal. But if the book underperforms, but then it like blows up on like streaming, well, since they wrote that contract so soon, that might not be a good, thing for the authors, but smart business play.
And it's definitely something that we're going to see more of because you're not hearing about them right now. But I remember, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, there was an article in Entertainment Weekly about how book franchises, even ones that are already existing, are becoming like the next big thing for movies, for movie studios and television studios to lock down because there's...
like Game of Thrones.
Yes, exactly. Game of Thrones.
Lord of the Rings series.
The Game of Thrones is the reason why this all really started happening, was because while there was a good fan base that was reading the Game of Thrones books prior to the series coming out, it turned into this epic, humongous, tons of people watched it, and it really drew in a lot of subscribers for HBO. There's the Lord of the Rings series that's coming to Amazon, and Amazon paid an exorbitant amount of money for the rights to that Lord of the Rings series. And then I want to say there's like 2 other series, but I am not familiar with them, so I couldn't talk about them.
Jack Ryan on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, Jack Ryan. Yeah, that's one, but that's not the one. There was like 2 book trilogies that I remember hearing about that are coming, and they're like supposed to be huge, like Hunger Games, Game of Thrones type huge, where they paid a lot of money for the rights. And I just remember the article talking about how these book collections that authors have written, there's so many fantasy authors out there that have done a variety of different works, and it's just a matter of like going through and trying to figure out who has really good ideas that will adapt very well for either television or for the big screen. So it's definitely something we're going to see more of, especially when there's less and there's more and more content that these providers are trying to create. They need more content. They need to find and seek out this stuff. And if there's already existing content that's already got this like built-in base of not only just one story, but multiple stories that they could adapt and have lots of stuff to do over time, that is a huge benefit to them because they've already got something to go off of and they can already see how, where the story goes. So it's a smart way to do that. So with that is actually going to bring us to content news. And there's a lot of content news over the past couple of weeks, and I said this last week. So this is a perfect time to announce that, as we talked about at the very end of our Peacock episode, we talked about what our plan was for the show in general. We talked about how we weren't planning necessarily on having a set schedule. It was going to be dependent on how much content we'd actually have, how many different topics, and how much discussion we could actually have. But to be completely frank, Tony and I could discuss this stuff for way, way longer than we're actually sitting here. One of the things that we've decided is that over the past couple of weeks, it's been kind of eye-opening as far as how much content there actually is to talk about. And there's lots of things to talk about in relation to the services. We want to talk about other things related to the services, like specific topics, things that we want to discuss in relation to the streaming services as a whole, that if we're constantly talking about the content as well as the general news topics every single week, and we're only having the one weekly episode that we try to stick with an hour long, there's not as much time as we really need to have in order to discuss all of this stuff. I believe that our episodes are pretty jam-packed with a lot of topics that we discuss, but I still want to make sure that these episodes aren't 2 hours long. There's no reason for us to have 2 hour long episodes. So what we've decided is we're actually going to start releasing 2 episodes per week starting next week. So this week will be the last week. We'll have both the news topics for the services as well as the content news as one episode. Starting next week, we will be releasing an episode on Wednesdays, specifically focusing on all of the content or all of the news topics that come out. And then we will be releasing an episode on Fridays that will cover all the content news. So everything that's coming out and as well as all the new trailers, we'll discuss all of that in a self-contained episode that will release on Fridays. And then the episodes that come out on Wednesdays will feature all of the topics related to the business side of things and all the news topics that we generally talk about here. Also, conveniently, next week we have the HBO Max, which is the rollout of a lot of the announcement of what we can expect from that service is coming next week on Tuesday, because at&t is hosting Warner Media Day, which is on October 29th. And they're expected to basically lay out a lot of the plans for HBO Max. So we will do a recap of everything that they announce for HBO Max, as well as anything else that pertains to HBO Max, or on top of any news topics that come up between now and then. And then next Thursday and next Friday, we'll be releasing the latest episode dealing with all of the content. So that way we have a little bit more time to talk about a lot of the content, but it separates the content from the news stuff, because to go from a lot of discussion related to the business side of things and move straight into the content, as you probably have noticed, at least over the past 2 episodes, we end up breezing through a lot of the content news, while some of this stuff we could talk for longer periods of time. It's just we don't, because we're trying to keep these episodes not super long. So I am going to roll through this content news fairly quickly, because I have even more news to cover than I did last week, and we have even less time to cover. So that's another reason as to obviously why we're going to be splitting the show into 2, and then it'll also, like I said, give us the opportunity to talk about other topics as well. So there'll be lulls of news, but we'll have times where we can maybe review some shows that we've seen, or dive more into specific things related to services, licensing rights and things like that. So
let's just be honest. We record these late at night because we have jobs. We just want to go to sleep. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's not. I mean, I could stay up pretty late, but I mean, some of you don't know how Tony gets when we get on here too late.
If we recorded, when we first get online, we could have a whole different episode. I don't think people understand. Like, we probably talk 30, 45 minutes about different topics, and we want to save that for you. We want to save that for the listener, so that you can be happy and listen to us, so that our conversations matter.
So expect more content. I don't think anybody's going to complain. We have gotten some feedback, a little bit of feedback over the first couple episodes, and it's been positive. So we know there's people actually listening. iTunes, we've got 2 5-star ratings, so that's nice. Thank you for those.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, we have.
Thanks, guys.
We've gotten a couple of emails from people. Like we said, we're planning on doing this for the long haul. We have put a lot of effort into creating the website to host this show, and we've put a lot of effort into basically a lot of what you see and what we do. There's a lot of stuff that goes into creating the stuff ahead of time, and there's a lot of work that we put into every single one of these individual episodes, prepping and finding the articles to talk about and things like that. So we hope you guys enjoy, and if you do, you can always shoot us an email, thestreamingwars@gmail.com. You can leave us comments, or you could connect with us on Twitter @StreamingWar. So there's a lot of different ways you could connect with us, but the point is, we don't think anybody's going to have a problem with us creating more content. Let's just be honest. So Diving into the content news, HBO Max has been on a trend of announcing a ton of different things, specifically because, as we know, they're going to announce a lot of things next week. There's a lot of things that they've announced. So far, over the past week, HBO Max greenlighted a new lifestyle docuseries, which is going to be focusing on TV personality Greg Goreski and Family Guy producer and writer Gary Janetti. And that's going to be... There's not a whole lot of details. It's just that it's been greenlit and they're making it. So there's that. They also announced that they picked up Amy Schumer documentary called Expecting Amy, which follows Amy Schumer as she goes on a comedy tour while she is actually pregnant. HBO Max also ordered a pilot for a new gothic drama from one of the creators behind Riverdale, as well as The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. That's coming. There's also a documentary focusing on public shaming coming from Monica Lewinsky for HBO Max. But yes.
That looks interesting.
Yes, it does. And I think that'll be really good. If anybody has watched her interview with John Oliver, I'm interested to see if she's just a producer for it or if she's actually involved in the actual on-screen version of what we see. But she actually comes across as somebody who, obviously, she's been through a lot. She has a lot of confidence, and time has given her a lot of confidence. And she also has... It was a really good interview. I encourage anybody to go check out the John Oliver interview with Monica Lewinsky from this past year.
She has a really good TED Talk. I'll just plug that right now. She has a TikTok talking about public shaming, or given everything she's been through. It was very enlightening.
All right, so yes, more HBO Max. There was another docuseries following the multi-generational Ho family, which is the Ho family is actually a Asian family. It's basically, the idea is it's an Asian family that's very, very rich. They have a massive empire down in Texas that deals with banking and real estate, and there's a variety of people, generations that they're going to focus on that are part of it. So it's basically, it's a new reality show, but it's going to be focusing on a family that has money. So think of it in line of, I think it's probably more like Real Housewives, but more in the vein of Crazy Rich Asians, which is the movie that came out last year. So there's also Lisa Ling, who is creating content currently over at CNN. She is going to be getting she struck an overall deal with HBO Max and will be hosting a travel docuseries called Birth, Wedding, Funeral. And this is a series that will dive into the differences between different cultures of the world that deal with births, weddings, and funerals, and how the different cultures, they treat those different situations. That actually sounds interesting to me, because I feel sometimes that I live in a bubble and I am unaware of how things work in other places. So learning stuff like that helps me understand just a little bit more about how the rest of the world actually works. They also announced that there is going to be, so Adventure Time wrapped up on Cartoon Network, but they announced that Adventure Time is actually going to be coming back on HBO Max for 4-hour-long specials that will feature all the original characters that fans know. The series ended in 2018, but the series will be coming back as 4-hour-long episodes, 2 of which will be coming in 2020, and 2 have a date yet to be announced. But that is coming. In addition to Adventure Time, they also announced that the second season of Genlock will move from Rooster Teeth over to HBO Max. It also announced in there that the episodes the second season will premiere on HBO Max exclusively, and then 90 days afterwards will move over to Rooster Teeth. Not move over, but also be available through Rooster Teeth, which is a paid service similar in the vein of DC Universe or Boomerang. And that actually leads me to this quick question that I want to say. Do you think that's likely to happen with a lot of the other services that are under the Warner Brother umbrella? Warner Brother has DC Universe and Boomerang and Crunchyroll and Rooster Teeth, and the list goes on and on. But there's a lot of services that are already creating content for. This leads me to believe that if they're creating content exclusively for HBO Max, there's a revenue that they can make money off of, but then obviously still have money on the back end of some of the smaller services. And it makes me think that the HBO Max is in fact going to be a higher priced, because these other services that offer the content aren't anywhere near that price. So you really can't sit there and say, as a consumer, you'll have two options. You can subscribe to HBO Max. You'll be able to see the content right away as it comes out, and you'll be able to see it, but you're going to pay top dollar for that. You're going to pay $15. Otherwise, you can subscribe to the lower service, which would be like Rooster Teeth or DC Universe or Boomerang, and you'll still get the content. You just won't get it as soon as everybody else does, but you won't pay nearly as much money. And I think that could happen with the DC Universe shows, because we already know that Doom Patrol is coming to HBO Max as well. So I imagine that series will be there. It's interesting because Titans is the one that nobody's really talking about. And I think Titans is an interesting predicament because they signed the deal with Netflix to distribute that show internationally, while Doom Patrol, I believe, wasn't internationally distributed. And I think that might be the reason why Titans doesn't end up on HBO Max, at least for the foreseeable future, because of that. My question, I guess, is, do you think that is a likely situation for a lot of these other services? It encourages people of these other services to subscribe to HBO Max, get all that content plus more, but pay more money, but then also leaves the ability for people to not have to pay the higher price, but then still allows them to get the content just a little bit later.
I'm going to be completely honest. You were talking about Rooster Teeth, and I had no clue what you were saying for the first 3 minutes, because how in the world am I supposed to remember all these different, HBO services, Warner Brothers services, sorry. That's a lot. I don't even think that the listeners, here's 3 of you guys, thanks, I don't think they even know what those ones were. I mean, in the general audience, who, I know Boomerang because of the old school cartoon, but that's a lot of services with very obscure names that are hard to remember, that do very niche things.
Let's be honest. I said Rooster Teeth and you got hung up because it was a rooster, and you're thinking, wait, another service that's named after a bird.
No,
I mean, I'm just messing with you, but
no, I know. No, that was funny. Yeah, it's just too many names, too many under one brand. You can't, I'll make this non-explicit. You can only do one thing well. You can't do multiple things at the same time and then do them, just as well. I kind of botched that because the original version is a little bit more explicit, but they can't run multiple streaming services. They need to consolidate all their efforts on one, and then maybe from there have different control levels for parental control and whatnot. Netflix has the kids version and whatnot, but it's all under one brand, under essentially one tech team and department. You have all these different services. It's bad for marketing because they're split between all these different departments. Branding, because, well, just by this conversation, no one knows what those are. Content-wise, there's a whole bunch of tech teams that you need to coordinate. They just need to consolidate.
I do not disagree, and I think that might have been the original intention when they talked about a tiered system with HBO Max, but because they decided to go the route of using the HBO brand, I don't think that they wanted a tiered system only for the fact of they didn't want to have an ad-supported version associated with HBO, because HBO has always been known as a premium content brand that's been ad-free. So they didn't want to do that. My guess, and this is also a prediction kind of towards the direction that we're going to see Warner Media go with HBO Max next week, is that these other services exist now. And in some cases, some of these services, you are offered a subscription to some of these services. For example, DC Universe launched in September of 2018. I subscribed for a year, which was a lower cost than paying monthly. Then, of course, September this year rolled around and it renewed, and now I'm a subscriber through next September. Now, if that same content ends up on HBO Max, at this point in time, I have every intention of subscribing to HBO Max for a variety of different content reasons. But if that content that's on DC Universe is on HBO Max, I don't have any need to stay at DC Universe. However, there are people who use DC Universe as, for the comics library that they offer or the community aspect of it. And I think that a service like DC Universe could still exist or in the same company as HBO Max, as long as the content is available on both services. HBO Max can help foot the bill for some of the content, freeing up DC Universe to focus on the community aspect or the comics or whatever, but the content is still there for subscribers to basically enjoy. Now, when you look at something like Verve or Boomerang or Crunchyroll or Rooster Teeth or any of these other services that were originally part of Otter Media, which technically was owned by AT&T before Warner Brothers absorbed a lot of them. Some of them were, not all of those that I just mentioned were. Some of those companies, they only create content, by my understanding. So if they are only creating content, there doesn't seem to be a reason to not roll them into HBO Max and just offer the content over there. But for the immediate future, it would be not great to tell somebody who's only paying $5 a month to suddenly say, hey, you've got to triple your charge per month to get the same content. By offering the content early over at HBO Max and then say, hey, you can get the content over there. We encourage you to go check it out. You go check it out. You see that there's a bunch of other content available. It will also maybe encourage you to subscribe to HBO Max for the higher price point and then unsubscribe from your current subscription that you have through some of these smaller ones. Then you can, slowly roll them out. There's no reason, especially if HBO Max is footing the bill for the content, there's no reason that these other services can't just exist in a smaller form because there's not a ton of marketing that goes into these services in general. The majority of the marketing could still be towards HBO Max. HBO Max will foot the bill for a lot of the marketing for the shows, and it makes sense. But I think that the smaller services, some of them could still exist to a degree. But I think that ultimately, once HBO Max exists, there's no reason not to roll a lot of the stuff that just has content into the other service. Because it builds the library for what HBO Max can offer. But then it also doesn't neglect the people who are already prepaying because, for example, I subscribe to Boomerang as well, and Boomerang, I have a yearly subscription, and that's up in April because they launched in April of 2018. It's one of those things where, I see what you're saying. There's no reason to have all of these different smaller companies existing under the same umbrella of the same larger, but I think that gradually over time, a lot of them will get rolled into it. It's not going to happen immediately because they've done so much with some of these companies, especially like these ones that have been around for a couple of years prior to HBO Max even launching.
I mean, who's to say that they can't grandfather in? That's one good business. Two, the smartest play is to just grandfather them into the program and be like, all right, here's your price until the contract runs out, and then, pay up again. So
I mean, and they might do something like that. DC Universe, see, I'm not familiar with a lot of the other ones to know what else they offer. DC Universe is one of the few that offers things outside of the content that people are actually interested in with the comics and the community. So I could see that one existing maybe at a lower price point, which would be beneficial to the people who are subscribing. So anyway, Genlock Season 2 coming to HBO Max. They also announced that they announced 4 different CNN documentary series or films that are coming. One of them is dealing with Heaven's Gate, which is a 4-part series. There's another one called Generation Hustle, which is a 10-part series from Alex Gibney, the same person who is behind the series Dirty Money, discussing the lengths that young people will go to for fame, fortune, and power, which sounds very interesting to me. There's a documentary feature called The Scoop, which deals with the female political reporters dealing the most unpredictable presidential campaign in American history. And then there's Persona, which is another documentary feature produced by CNN Films that explores the origin of America's obsession with personality testing. So those 4 were just announced today. Some other services announcement. Disney Plus announced that High School Musical, the series, has already been renewed for Season 2, even though that hasn't even debuted Season 1 yet. Apple also, they set a overall deal with Monica Belitsky, who is a producer behind series like Fargo, Friday Night Lights, and Parenthood. Apple TV also said that they will be releasing the entire season of Dickinson on November 1st. This is contrary to a lot of previous reports, which makes me question whether or not the series is going to be successful. If only for the fact of if their entire model is to release episodes weekly and they're letting the entire series release at once, it feels like they're just getting it out there for people to watch. Now, it could be a different situation where the series works better in a binge method of viewing, and that could be the case. I don't know for sure. I haven't really heard a whole lot of things. I saw the trailer. It didn't look very interesting. I wasn't super interested in the series based off of the trailer. But
gonna be honest, after looking at some of the news that's come out about the show, yeah, they're definitely public reception. I don't think this is getting a second season. We'll let it all go and move on, you know?
Yeah. All right, so then Netflix announced that they're ordering a Korean Wizard of Oz-esque romantic comedy series called Crash Landing on You. There's not a whole lot of details other than they ordered it. Amazon announced that they gave the new series Modern Love, which came out just last Friday, they renewed it for season 2, and the executive producer John Carney has also inked an overall deal with Amazon Studios to produce even more content for the company. Over on Disney Plus, which I know I already mentioned it, but there's a number of new documentaries that they announced just this past week as well. A film called Howard, which deals with Howard Ashman, who penned the unforgettable lyrics for Disney classics like Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and Little Mermaid, and created such musicals as Little Shop of Horrors. There's an Untitled Mickey Mouse documentary, which deals with the cultural impact that Mickey Mouse as a character has had on the world.
You're going to be watching that one, I bet.
I will be, yes. There's another one from National Geographic called Science Fair. This is a film that was previously revealed at South by Southwest and Sundance, and it was a journey of 9 high school students from around the globe on their journey to compete in the International Science and Engineering Fair, navigating rivalry, setbacks, and of course hormones along the way. People and Places. This is an upcoming series that will present true stories from around the globe about real and extraordinary people who embody the Disney ethos. This is actually a series that Walt Disney himself had on television back in the 50s and 60s, and this is going to be just a new series focusing on kind of the same ideas that original series was. There will also be one called Wolfgang. This will be a documentary that follows the life and work around the original celebrity chef Wolfgang Puck. And they have other ones that they've already announced that are coming right away when the series launches or when the service launches. But these were all announced specifically at the International Documentary Association that just took place last week. So that's part of the reason why we've been hearing so many things about documentary series. Finally, on the Disney Plus news, just announced yesterday, there is a Hocus Pocus 2 that is currently in works for Disney Plus and has a writer attached to it as well. So whether nobody knows really anything about whether or not it's an actual sequel or a prequel or you just connect to the same idea or anything like that, Disney has a tendency to take successful things in general and redo them. I mean, let's be honest. There's a lot of animated movies that have become live action over the past couple of years, building on that nostalgic element. Yeah. So
Beauty and the Beast.
So that is
Mulan.
All of the content. Yes, Mulan's coming next year. Yes, there's lots and lots of content news. Wrapping out the episode, there's a number of new trailers. I'm not going to roll through all of them. I'm not actually going to roll through any of them because they are in the show notes. If you want to check them out, you certainly can. Content that is coming out over the next 2 weeks. Over on Amazon, there is an If You Give a Mouse a Cookie Halloween special that's coming out on October 25th. Just Add Magic, New Protectors, which is also on October 25th, and then Unforgotten Season 3. Outside of that, there's no other new content coming from Amazon for the rest of the month because we're covering everything through the 31st at this point. Over on Hulu, the only thing that's coming out is Zomboat, which the trailer was actually in the show notes from last week. But this is a ITV series that will be exclusively on Hulu in the United States. Outside of that, over on Netflix, there's a bunch of stuff that's coming out because there's always a bunch of stuff coming out on Netflix. There's Brotherhood, a new Netflix original. There's a number of new Netflix films. The Kaminski Method Season 2 is coming out. That's probably one of the ones that's probably a bigger release that more people are talking about. Prank Encounters is another one that has been talked about. Little Miss Sumu, we just had that trailer pop up in the show notes either last week or 2 weeks ago. So there's a lot of different things that are coming out, but let's be honest, there's always new content all over the place that is constantly coming out. To wrap out the episode, was there anything over the past week that you checked out on any streaming service?
Gonna be honest, no, but there's something I am looking forward to which is The Mandalorian, and I'm just so excited, and I cannot wait to get Disney Plus. I made the decision that I'm going to drop Netflix. There's just too much good content on other platforms, so I'm going to make a change. I'm going to take my talents elsewhere to Disney Plus, and then when The Mandalorian comes out, I'm going to watch the crap out of that show.
Over the past week, have actually watched probably more content. I think that since we started this show, I have a tendency to start watching. I'm watching more content on these services. Not that I wasn't watching content before, but a lot of the stuff that I have on my DVR, I haven't been watching. And unlike Tony, I don't watch a lot of sports. Well, I don't really watch any sports in general. So I have a lot more free time on my hands when it comes to watching content. So I actually watched a bunch of stuff last week, and all the stuff that I watched just came out this past week. So I watched The Laundromat, which was the new movie with Meryl Streep, Gary Oldman, Antonio Banderas. I watched that.
What was that?
It was enjoyable.
You sound so convinced.
I mean, like, it was good. If you've watched other Steven Soderbergh movies, it's very in line with other movies that he makes, where it's got that snarky attitude. I kind of figured out the twist about halfway through. I watched that. Okay. I also watched the full season of Modern Love over on Amazon Prime, mostly because I was trying to find something that my wife would enjoy watching. So we watched that. And that's an anthology series. I'll say this, there was some episodes that I thought were very good. There were some episodes that I was like, I don't know what this is. And again, if you're one of those people out there who have watched Modern Love, you'll probably know which episodes I'm talking. And then finally, the last thing I watched was the new Paul Rudd series, Living with Yourself. I actually found that very enjoyable. It's very dark comedy, which I have a tendency to enjoy dark comedy way more than normal comedy.
Ooh, I love dark comedy.
And it's definitely that. I really enjoyed it. For the most part, it was a good series. It's very quick, only 8 episodes. They're all less than 30 minutes, so you can just breeze through it in, afternoon, which is what I did. I mean, I watched in retrospect, I watched way more content than I typically would, mostly because I wanted to check out some of this stuff, and because ever since we started doing the show, I'm more aware of the stuff as it's coming. So because of that, I'm paying more closer attention to stuff as it's releasing, because I just know that it's coming. But at the same time, I'm looking at the stuff that's coming over this next week, and I'm not really seeing anything that I'm like super interested in. So I might watch some stuff that hasn't, and obviously I'll report back on that next week. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I just with work and some personal things, I've been able to watch so much actual content I need to pay attention to. With sports, it's you can have it in the background and not pay attention to it.
It's true.
So,
I completely understand that. My weekends just consist of no work, because I try to step away from work as much as possible on the weekends, and then I have no opportunity to watch anything during the week because of that, because I'm working all the time. So yes. So that being said, that is going to wrap up this episode. This episode is obviously way longer than any other episode that we've released, and I apologize for that, but we have acknowledged that these episodes are longer, and like I said, we're going to be splitting these up so that we talk more about the content on a separate episode.
All 3 people that listen to the show will love it.
Yes, and hopefully you guys love it enough to listen to both episodes and not just one or the other. But we'll see.
And give us a 5-star review.
Yes, because we've gotten 2, so that means one of you hasn't rated us yet. So that being said, we appreciate you guys listening. You can head over to the site for all the show notes, but also the show notes are available on pretty much every platform that you're seeing it. I think one of the few that you can't is Apple. I don't think they show the extent of the show notes. They just show a selection because we have so much. But you can find all the show notes with links to all the articles that we discussed, as well as the trailers that released over the past week over on the site, thestreamingwars.io. Leave us reviews on any of the podcast platforms you're listening to us on. Those are always greatly appreciated. If you're listening to us on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe, and you'll be notified every single time that we have a new episode that we do release. As we said, next week we'll be releasing an episode on Wednesday and on Friday. But yes, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram. Instagram is where you'll find all of the latest announcements for new episodes, but Twitter is really where you need to be following us if you want to catch up with all of the latest news. I'm going to a pretty decent effort of posting all of the news that I'm seeing as I'm seeing it that we'll be discussing on the show. We also have a Discord where we also post the same exact links, but that is a place where we can actually discuss that with you guys. So check out the Discord. Links to everywhere you can find us, including the podcast platforms, is over on the site, thestreamingwars.io. You can email us at thestreamingwars@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns that you have about the show, and we'll either email you back or discuss it on a future episode. So with that being said, for Tony and myself, this has been The Streaming Wars, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to The Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.